Hi, welcome to section 3 on certificate management. In this section, we're going to take some time to build and configure a certificate authority, create and publish templates for that CA. We'll use group policy to distribute a root certificate, and then we'll walk through requesting and approving a certificate, in this case for a web server, and then we will configure that web server with our certificate and visit and see that we now have a valid connection over SSL to that server. We will have a couple of VMs for this section, so just a brief overview of the infrastructure I'll be using. One is that packlab.local domain controller DC01, and we'll be using that to create our certificate authority. We'll have a web server up called Web01 that will have the IIS features installed, and then we'll also have a server called Client01, which will just be a bare Windows Server 2016 box that we will use to validate our group policy that we put into place. This is the video for building and configuring a certificate authority. Now in this video we'll install the role and features that are required to stand up our own certificate authority within the domain, and then we're going to configure the certificate authority to be an enterprise CA for this domain. So with that, I'm going to move over to DC01. And here we are on DC01, and we'll go into our management and add roles and features. Go ahead and click on next and choose the role based on DC01. And at the top here we'll have Active Directory Certificate Services, and it's going to install that role and the management tools. So let's add, and we'll just kind of walk through this next for most of the things here. One thing to keep in mind, you shouldn't be doing any domain joining, computer renames, anything like that after you build that CA. So let's go ahead here and select our roles. So we'll actually install a couple of different things here. One is the Enrollment Policy Web Service, the Certificate Enrollment Web Service, and then the CA Web Enrollment. So it's going to install multiple features on the box, not just the certification authority, but also IIS, a web server, and then there'll be sites on that web server where we can visit in the browser to request certificates and perform some tasks on the CA. So I'm going to next through here and just accept the defaults. And then we have our confirmation, so I'll say go ahead and allow an automatic restart here, and let's install. And I'm going to pause this and we'll come back to it as soon as it is finished. Okay, we can see our installation has succeeded. I'll go ahead and close this. And you'll see we have a notification at the top here. You do have post-deployment configuration steps to take to configure certificate services. So let's go ahead and log in there. I'll just be using the administrator account. And so for configuring the certification authority and web enrollment, you need to do those two first, and then you can come back and install the enrollment services. You'll see here, if I try to add that, you get an error message saying, hey, we can't do this at the same time. Let's get the foundation in place, and then we can put these other layers on top. So we'll go through and configure the CA and the CA web enrollment. And we want to select Enterprise. So an Enterprise CA is going to be integrated with Active Directory, and we are going to stick with Active Directory here. Since this is our first CA we're building, we need to build a root. From there, you can actually build subordinates, and those can be divided up based on tasks. So some could be for, say, IPsec, and some could be for web services. It could be located by site, so you could have different branch offices with CAs, but then have a root that they all source from initially. So it's up to however your infrastructure is laid out and what makes the most sense to you. So for this, again, we're sticking with root CA. We need to create a new private key since we do not have one yet. And we're going to stick with Microsoft Software Key Storage Provider, 2048 is fine, and SHA-256 should be okay. And then here you can change this common name if you would like. I'm just going to leave this all to the defaults. Keep our validity period at 5 years. And keep our database and log locations all just the defaults. So here we can see the summary. We're going to go ahead and create a private key when we're done here, and then we should be able to move on to configuring the next services. So I'll hit configure and let this do its work. We can see that the configuration is done, so we'll hit close, and now we're asked if we want to configure additional role services. So I'll say yes, and this brings you straight back to that wizard where we can now enable our enrollment web service and our enrollment policy web service. So here we need to select the certificate to use, and we are going to pick, the CA that we want to use, and we're going to go ahead and pick what we just configured, which is the local host. If we were separating these roles, we would just want to make sure we were pointing back to the CA. And I'll go ahead and hit next. We'll stick with Windows Integrated Authentication since we're going to be all within Active Directory here. And then for the service account, since I don't have a specific account built here, I'm just going to use the built-in application pool identity. If you're branching out into a larger build for your environment, the service account makes more sense. So click through, we want to use that integrated authentication again. We have to choose the certificate. We had just created that root certificate here. So I'll select that, hit next, and now we want to hit configure, and it should take care of configuring both of these. So at this point, our CA services should be initially enabled. We'll need to do a little bit more configuration, but you can see here under Tools, we have our Certification Authority console. We can go to our root CA here, and if we go to certificate templates, we can see that these stock templates have been populated for various certificate types and purposes.